Candide by Voltaire. Chapter 16. Adventures of the two travelers with two girls, two monkeys, and the savages called Oraillons. Candide and his valet had got beyond the barrier before it was known in the camp that the German Jesuit was dead. The wary Cacambo had taken care to fill his wallet with bread, chocolate, bacon, fruit, and a few bottles of wine. With their Andalusian horses they penetrated into an unknown country where they perceived no beaten track. At length they came to a beautiful meadow, intersected with purling rills. Here our two adventurers fed their horses. Cacambo proposed to his master to take some food, and he set him an example. "How can you ask me to eat ham?" said Candide, "after killing the Baron's son and being doomed never more to see the beautiful Cunegonde? What will it avail me to spin out my wretched days and drag them far from her in remorse and despair? And what will the journal of travaux say?" While he was thus lamenting his fate, he went on eating. The sun went down. The two wanderers heard some little cries which seemed to be uttered by women. They did not know whether they were cries of pain or joy, but they started up precipitately, with that inquietude and alarm which every little thing inspires in an unknown country. The noise was made by two naked girls, who tripped along the mead while two monkeys were pursuing them and biting their buttocks. Candide was moved with pity. He had learned to fire a gun in the Bulgarian service, and he was so clever at it that he could hit a filbert in a hedge without touching a leaf of the tree. He took up his double-barreled Spanish fusil, let it off, and killed the two monkeys. "God be praised, my dear Cacambo. I have rescued those two poor creatures from a most perilous situation. If I have committed a sin in killing an inquisitor and a Jesuit, I have made ample amends by saving the lives of these girls. Perhaps they are young ladies of family, and this adventure may procure us great advantages in this country." He was continuing, but stopped when he saw the two girls tenderly embracing the monkeys, bathing their bodies in tears, and rending the air with the most dismal lamentations. "Little did I expect to see such good nature," said he at length to Cacambo, who made answer, "Master, you have done a fine thing now. You have slain the sweethearts of those two young ladies." "The sweethearts? Is it possible? You are jesting, Cacambo. I can never believe it." "Dear master," replied Cacambo, "you are surprised at everything. Why should you think it is so strange that in some countries there are monkeys which insinuate themselves into the good graces of the ladies? They are a fourth part human, as I am a fourth part Spaniard." "Alas," replied Candide, "I remember to have heard Master Pangloss say that formerly such accidents used to happen, that these mixtures were productive of centaurs, fauns, and satyrs, and that many of the ancients had seen such monsters. But I looked upon the whole as fabulous." "You ought now to be convinced," said Cacambo, "that it is the truth, and you see what use is made of those creatures by persons who have not a proper education. All I fear is that those ladies will play us some ugly trick." These sound reflections induced Candide to leave the meadow and to plunge into a wood. He supped there with Cacambo, and after cursing the Portuguese inquisitor, the governor of Buenos Aires, and the baron, they fell asleep on moss. On awaking, they felt they could not move, for during the night the Oraillons, who inhabited that country and to whom the ladies had denounced them, had bound them with cords made of the bark of trees. They were encompassed by 50 naked Oraillons, armed with bows and arrows, with clubs and flint hatchets. Some were making a large cauldron boil, others were preparing spits, and all cried, A Jesuit, a Jesuit! We shall be revenged. We shall have excellent cheer. Let us eat the Jesuit. Let us eat him up. I told you, my dear master, cried Cacambo sadly, that those two girls would play us some ugly trick. Candide, seeing the cauldron and the spits, cried, we are certainly going to be either roasted or boiled. What would Master Pangloss say were he to see how pure nature is formed? Everything is right, may be, but I declare it is very hard to have lost Miss Cunegonde and to be put upon a spit by Orellons. Cacambo never lost his head. Do not despair, said he to the disconsolate Candide. I understand a little of the jargon of these people. I will speak to them. Be sure, said Candide, to represent to them how frightfully inhuman it is to cook men, and how very unchristian. Gentlemen, said Cacambo, you reckon you are today going to feast upon a Jesuit. It is all very well. Nothing is more unjust than thus to treat your enemies. Indeed, the law of nature teaches us to kill our neighbor, and such is the practice all over the world. If we do not accustom ourselves to eating them, it is because we have better fare. But you have not the same resources as we. Certainly it is much better to devour your enemies than to resign to the crows and rooks the fruits of your victory. But, gentlemen, surely you would not choose to eat your friends. You believe that you are going to spit a Jesuit, and here's your defender. It is the enemy of your enemies that you are going to roast. As for myself, I was born in your country. This gentleman is my master, and far from being a Jesuit, he has just killed one, whose spoils he wears. And thence comes your mistake. To convince you of the truth of what I say, take his habit and carry it to the first barrier of the Jesuit kingdom, and inform yourselves whether my master did not kill a Jesuit officer. It will not take you long, and you can always eat us if you find that I have lied to you. But I have told you the truth. You are too well acquainted with the principles of public law, humanity, and justice not to pardon us. The Orellons found the speech very reasonable. They deputed two of their principal people with all expedition to inquire into the truth of the matter. These executed their commission like men of sense, and soon returned with good news. The Orellons untied their prisoners, showed them all sorts of civilities, offered them girls, gave them refreshment, and reconducted them to the confines of their territories, proclaiming with great joy, "He is not Jesuit! He is not Jesuit!" Candide could not help being surprised at the cause of his deliverance. "What people!" said he. "What men! What manners! If I had not been so lucky as to run Miss Cunegonde's brother through the body, I should have been devoured without redemption. But after all, pure nature is good. Since these people, instead of feasting upon my flesh, have shown me 1,000 civilities, when then I was not a Jesuit." Chapter 17. Arrival of Candide and his valet at El Dorado, and what they saw there. "You see," said Cacambo to Candide, as soon as they had reached the frontiers of the Orellons, "that this hemisphere is not better than the others. Take my word for it. Let us go back to Europe by the shortest way." "How go back?" said Candide. "And where shall we go? To my own country? The Bulgarians and the Abaris are slaying all. To Portugal? There I shall be burnt. And if we abide here, we are every moment in danger of being spitted. But how can I resolve to quit a part of the world where my dear Cunegonde resides?" "Let us turn toward Cayenne," said Cacambo. "There we shall find Frenchmen who wander all over the world. They may assist us. God will perhaps have pity on us." It was not easy to get to Cayenne. They knew vaguely in which direction to go, but rivers, precipices, robbers, savages obstructed them all the way. Their horses died of fatigue. Their provisions were consumed. They fed a whole month upon wild fruits, and found themselves at last near a little river bordered with cocoa trees, which sustained their lives and their hopes. Cacambo, who was as good a counselor as the old woman, said to Candide, "We are able to hold out no longer. We have walked enough. I see an empty canoe near the riverside. Let us fill it with coconuts, throw ourselves into it, and go with the current. A river always leads to some inhabited spot. If we do not find pleasant things, we shall at least find new things." "With all my heart," said Candide, "let us recommend ourselves to Providence." They rowed a few leagues between banks, in some places flowery, in others barren, in some parts smooth, in others rugged. The stream ever widened, and at length lost itself under an arch of frightful rocks, which reached to the sky. The two travelers had the courage to commit themselves to the current. The river, suddenly contracting at this place, whirled them along with a dreadful noise and rapidity. At the end of 24 hours, they saw daylight again, but their canoe was dashed to pieces against the rocks. For a league, they had to creep from rock to rock, until at length they discovered an extensive plain, bounded by inaccessible mountains. The country was cultivated as much for pleasure as for necessity. On all sides the useful was also the beautiful. The roads were covered, or rather adorned, with carriages of glittering form and substance, in which were men and women of surprising beauty, drawn by the large red sheep which surpassed in fleetness the finest coursers of Andalusia, Tetuan, and Mequinez. "Here, however, is a country," said Candide, "which is better than Westphalia." He stepped out with Cacambo towards the first village which he saw. Some children dressed in tattered brocades played at quoits on the outskirts. Our travellers from the other world amused themselves by looking on. The quoits were large round pieces, yellow, red, and green, which cast a singular lustre. The travellers picked a few of them off the ground. This was of gold, that of emeralds, and the other of rubies. The least of them would have been the greatest ornament on the Mogul's throne. "Without doubt," said Cacambo, "these children must be the king's sons that are playing at quoits." The village schoolmaster appeared at this moment and called them to school. "There," said Candide, "is the preceptor of the royal family." The little truants immediately quitted their game, leaving the quoits on the ground with all their other playthings. Candide gathered them up, ran to the master, and presented them to him in a most humble manner, giving him to understand by signs that their royal highnesses had forgotten their gold and jewels. The schoolmaster, smiling, flung them upon the ground, then looking at Candide with a good deal of surprise, went about his business. The travellers, however, took care to gather up the gold, the rubies, and the emeralds. "Where are we?" cried Candide. "The king's children in this country must be well brought up, since they are taught to despise gold and precious stones." Cacambo was as surprised as Candide. At length they drew near the first house in the village. It was built like a European palace. A crowd of people pressed about the door, and there were still more in the house. They heard most agreeable music, and were aware of a delicious odor of cooking. Cacambo went up to the door and heard they were talking Peruvian. It was his mother tongue, for it is well known that Cacambo was born in Tucuman, in a village where no other language was spoken. "I will be your interpreter here," said he to Candide. "Let us go in. It is a public house." Immediately 2 waiters and 2 girls, dressed in cloth of gold, and their hair tied up with ribbons, invited them to sit down to table with the landlord. They served 4 dishes of soup, each garnished with 2 young parrots, a boiled condor which weighed 200 pounds, 2 roasted monkeys of excellent flavor, 300 hummingbirds in 1 dish, and 600 flybirds in another. Exquisite ragouts, delicious pastries, the whole served up in dishes of a kind of rock crystal. The waiters and girls poured out several liqueurs, drawn from the sugar cane. Most of the company were chapmen and wagoners, all extremely polite. They asked Cacambo a few questions with the greatest circumspection, and answered his in the most obliging manner. As soon as dinner was over, Cacambo believed as well as Candide that they might well pay their reckoning by laying down 2 of those large gold pieces which they had picked up. The landlord and landlady shouted with laughter and held their sides. When the fit was over, "Gentlemen," said the landlord, "it is plain you are strangers, and such guests we are not accustomed to see. Pardon us, therefore, for laughing when you offered us the pebbles from our high roads in payment of your reckoning. You doubtless have not the money of the country, but it is not necessary to have any money at all to dine in this house. All hostelries established for the convenience of commerce are paid by the government. You have fared but very indifferently because this is a poor village. But everywhere else you will be received as you deserve." Cacambo explained this whole discourse with great astonishment to Candide, who was as greatly astonished to hear it. "What sort of country, then, is this?" said they to one another. "A country unknown to all of the rest of the world, where nature is of a kind so different from ours. It is probably the country where all is well, for there absolutely must be one such place. And whatever Master Pangloss might say, I often find that things went very ill in Westphalia." Chapter 18. What they saw in the country of El Dorado. Cacambo expressed his curiosity to the landlord, who made answer, "I am very ignorant, but not the worse on that account. However, we have in this neighborhood an old man retired from court, who is the most learned and most communicative person in the kingdom." At once he took Cacambo to the old man. Candide acted now only a second character, and accompanied his valet. They entered a very plain house, for the door was only of silver, and the ceilings were only of gold, but wrought in so elegant a taste as to vie with the richest. The antechamber indeed was only encrusted with rubies and emeralds, but the order in which everything was arranged made amends for this great simplicity. The old man received the strangers on his sofa, which was stuffed with hummingbird feathers, and ordered his servants to present them with liqueurs and diamond goblets, after which he satisfied their curiosity in the following terms. "I am now 172 years old, and I learnt of my late father, master of the horse to the king, the amazing revolutions of Peru, of which he had been eyewitness. The kingdom we now inhabit is the ancient country of the Incas, who quitted it very imprudently to conquer another part of the world, and were at length destroyed by the Spaniards. More wise by far were the princes of their family, who remained in their native country, and they ordained, with the consent of the whole nation, that none of the inhabitants should ever be permitted to quit this little kingdom, and this has preserved our innocence and happiness. The Spaniards have had a confused notion of this country, and have called it El Dorado, and an Englishman, whose name was Sir Walter Raleigh, came very near it about 100 years ago, but being surrounded by inaccessible rocks and precipices, we have hitherto been sheltered from the rapaciousness of European nations, who have an inconceivable passion for the pebbles and dirt of our land, for the sake of which they would murder us to the last man." The conversation was long. It turned chiefly on their form of government, their manners, their women, their public entertainments, and the arts. At length Candide, having always had a taste for metaphysics, made Cacambo ask whether there was any religion in that country. The old man reddened a little. "How then?" said he. "Can you doubt it? Do you take us for ungrateful wretches?" Cacambo humbly asked, "What was the religion in El Dorado?" The old man reddened again. "Can there be two religions?" said he. "We have, I believe, the religion of all the world. We worship God night and morning." "Do you worship but one God?" said Cacambo, who still acted as interpreter in representing Candide's doubts. "Surely," said the old man, "there are not two, nor three, nor four. I must confess the people from your side of the world ask very extraordinary questions." Candide was not yet tired of interrogating the good old man. He wanted to know in what manner they prayed to God in El Dorado. "We do not pray to him," said the worthy sage. "We have nothing to ask of him. He has given us all we need, and we return him thanks without ceasing." Candide, having a curiosity to see the priests, asked where they were. The good old man smiled. "My friend," said he, "we are all priests. The king and all the heads of family sing solemn canticles of thanksgiving every morning, accompanied by 5,000 or 6,000 musicians." "What? Have you no monks who teach, who dispute, who govern, who cabal, who burn people that are not of their opinion?" "We must be mad indeed if that were the case," said the old man. "Here we are all of one opinion, and we know not what you mean by monks." During this whole discourse, Candide was in raptures, and he said to himself, "This is vastly different from Westphalia and the Baron's castle. Had our friend Pangloss seen El Dorado, he would no longer have said that the castle of Tundetentonk was the finest upon earth. It is evident that one must travel." After this long conversation, the old man ordered a coach and 6 sheep to be got ready, and 12 of his domestics to conduct the travellers to court. "Excuse me," said he, "if my age deprives me of the honor of accompanying you. The king will receive you in a manner that cannot displease you. No doubt he will make an allowance for the customs of the country, if something should not be to your liking." Candide and Cacambo got into the coach. The 6 sheep flew, and in less than 4 hours they reached the king's palace, situated at the extremity of the capital. The portal was 220 feet high and 100 wide, but words are wanting to express the materials of which it was built. It is plain such materials must have prodigious superiority over those pebbles and sand which we call gold and precious stones. 20 beautiful damsels of the king's guard received Candide and Cacambo as they alighted from the coach, conducted them to the bath, and dressed them in robes woven of the down of hummingbirds, after which the great crown officers of both sexes led them to the king's apartment, between 2 files of musicians, 1,000 on each side. Then they drew near to the audience chamber, and Cacambo asked one of the great officers in what way he should pay his obeisance to his majesty, whether they should throw themselves upon their knees or on their stomachs, whether they should put their hands upon their heads or behind their backs, whether they should lick the dust off the floor. In a word, what was the ceremony? "The custom," said the great officer, "is to embrace the king and to kiss him on each cheek." Candide and Cacambo threw themselves around his majesty's neck. He received them with all the goodness imaginable, and politely invited them to supper. While waiting, they were shown the city, and saw the public edifices raised as high as the clouds, the marketplaces ornamented with 1,000 columns, the fountains of spring water, those of rose water, those of liqueurs drawn from sugar-cane, incessantly flowing into the great squares, which were paved with a kind of precious stone, which gave off a delicious fragrancy, like that of cloves and cinnamon. Candide asked to see the court of justice, the parliament. They told them they had none, and that they were strangers to lawsuits. He asked if they had any prisons, and they answered no. But what surprised him most, and gave him the greatest pleasure, was the Palace of Sciences, where he saw a gallery 2,000 feet long, and filled with instruments employed in mathematics and physics. After rambling about the city the whole afternoon and seeing but 1,000th part of it, they were reconducted to the royal palace, where Candide sat down to table with his majesty, his valet Cacambo, and several ladies. Never was there a better entertainment, and never was more wit shown at a table than that which fell from his majesty. Cacambo explained the king's bon mots to Candide, and notwithstanding they were translated, they still appeared to be bon mots. Of all the things that surprised Candide, this was not the least. They spent a month in this hospitable place. Candide frequently said to Cacambo, "I own, my friend, once more that the castle where I was born is nothing in comparison with this. But after all, Miss Cunegonde is not here, and you have without doubt some mistress in Europe. If we abide here, we shall only be upon a footing with the rest. Whereas, if we return to our old world, only with 12 sheep laden with the pebbles of El Dorado, we shall be richer than all the kings in Europe. We shall have no more inquisitors to fear, and we may easily recover Miss Cunegonde." This speech was agreeable to Cacambo. Mankind are so fond of roving, of making a figure in their own country, and of boasting of what they've seen in their travels, that the two happy ones resolved to be no longer so, but to ask his majesty's leave to quit the country. "You are foolish," said the king. "I am sensible that my kingdom is but a small place, but when a person is comfortably settled in any part, he should abide there. I have not the right to detain strangers. It is a tyranny which neither our manners nor our laws permit. All men are free. Go when you wish, but the going will be very difficult. It is impossible to ascend that rapid river on which you came as by a miracle, and which runs under vaulted rocks. The mountains which surround my kingdom are 10,000 feet high and as steep as walls. They are each over 10 leagues in breadth, and there is no other way to descend them, by precipices. However, since you absolutely wish to depart, I shall give orders to my engineers to construct a machine that will convey you very safely. When we have conducted you over the mountains, no one can accompany you further, for my subjects have made a vow never to quit the kingdom, and they are too wise to break it. Ask me, besides, anything that you please." "We desire nothing of your majesty," says Candide, "but a few sheep laden with provisions, pebbles, and the earth of this country." The king laughed. "I cannot conceive," said he, "what pleasure you Europeans find in our yellow clay, but take as much as you like, and great good may it do you." At once he gave directions that his engineers should construct a machine to hoist up these two extraordinary men out of the kingdom. 3,000 good mathematicians went to work. It was ready in 15 days, and did not cost more than 20 million sterling in the specie of that country. They placed Candide and Cacambo on the machine. There were 2 great red sheep saddled and bridled to ride upon as soon as they were beyond the mountains, 20 pack sheep laden with provisions, 30 with presents of the curiosities of the country, and 50 with gold, diamonds, and precious stones. The king embraced the 2 wanderers very tenderly. Their departure with the ingenious manner in which they and their sheep were hoisted over the mountains was a splendid spectacle. The mathematicians took their leave after conveying to them a place of safety, and Candide had no other desire, no other aim, than to present his sheep to Miss Cunegonde. "Now," said he, "we are able to pay the governor of Buenos Aires if Miss Cunegonde can be ransomed. Let us journey towards Cayenne. Let us embark, and we will afterwards see what kingdom we shall be able to purchase." Chapter 19. What happened to them at Suriname, and how Candide got acquainted with Martin. Our travellers spent the first day very agreeably. They were delighted with possessing more treasure than all Asia, Europe, and Africa could scrape together. Candide, in his raptures, cut Cunegonde's name on the trees. The second day, 2 of their sheep plunged into a morass, where they and their burdens were lost. 2 more died of fatigue a few days after. 7 or 8 perished with hunger in a desert, and others subsequently fell down precipices. At length, after travelling 100 days, only 2 sheep remained. Said Candide to Cacambo, "My friend, you see how perishable are the riches of this world. There is nothing solid but virtue, and the happiness of seeing Cunegonde once more." "I grant all you say," said Cacambo, "but we still have 2 sheep remaining, with more treasure than the King of Spain will ever have. I see a town which I take to be Suriname, belonging to the Dutch. We are at the end of all our troubles, and at the beginning of happiness." As they drew near the town, they saw a Negro stretched upon the ground, with only one moiety of his clothes, that is, of his blue linen drawers. The poor man had lost his left leg and his right hand. "Good God!" said Candide in Dutch, "what art thou doing there, friend, in that shocking condition?" "I am waiting for my master, Mynheer Vanderdender, the famous merchant," answered the Negro. "Was it Mynheer Vanderdender," said Candide, "that treated thee thus?" "Yes, sir," said the Negro. "It is the custom. They give us a pair of linen drawers for our whole garment twice a year. When we work at the sugar canes and the mill snatches hold of a finger, they cut off the hand, and when we attempt to run away, they cut off the leg. Both cases have happened to me. This is the price at which you eat sugar in Europe. Yet, when my mother sold me for 10 patagons on the coast of Guinea, she said to me, 'My dear child, bless our fetishes. Adore them forever. They will make thee live happily. Thou hast the honor of being the slave of our lords, the whites, which is making the fortune of thy father and mother.' Alas, I know not whether I have made their fortunes. This I know, that they have not made mine. Dogs, monkeys, and parrots are 1,000 times less wretched than I. The Dutch fetishes, who have converted me, declare every Sunday that we are all of us children of Adam, blacks as well as whites. I am not a genealogist, but if these preachers tell truth, we are all second cousins. Now, you must agree that it is impossible to treat one's relations in a more barbarous manner." "Oh, Pangloss," cried Candide, "thou hadst not guessed at this abomination. It is the end. I must at last renounce thy optimism." "What is optimism?" said Cacambo. "Alas," said Candide, "it is the madness of maintaining that everything is right when it is wrong." Looking at the Negro, he shed tears, and weeping, he entered Suriname. The first thing they inquired after was whether there was a vessel in the harbor which could be sent to Buenos Aires. The person to whom they applied was a Spanish sea captain, who offered to agree with them upon reasonable terms. He appointed to meet them at a public house, whither Candide and the faithful Cacambo went with their 2 sheep and awaited his coming. Candide, who had his heart upon his lips, told the Spaniard all his adventures, and avowed he intended to elope with Miss Cunegonde. "Then I will take good care not to carry you to Buenos Aires, said the seaman. I should be hanged, and so would you. The fair Cunegonde is my lord's favourite mistress. This was a thunderclap for Candide. He wept for a long while. At last he drew Cacambo aside. Here, my dear friend, said he to him, this thou must do. We have, each of us in his pocket, 5 or 6 million in diamonds. You are more clever than I. You must go and bring Miss Cunegonde from Buenos Aires. If the governor makes any difficulty, give him 1 million. If he will not relinquish her, give him 2. As you have not killed an inquisitor, they will have no suspicion of you. I'll get another ship, and go and wait for you at Venice. That's a free country, where there is no danger either from Bulgarians, Avares, Jews, or inquisitors. Cacambo applauded this wise resolution. He despaired at parting from so good a master, who had become his intimate friend, but the pleasure of serving him prevailed over the pain of leaving him. They embraced with tears. Candide charged him not to forget the good old woman. Cacambo set out that very same day. This Cacambo was a very honest fellow. Candide stayed some time longer in Suriname, waiting for another captain to carry him, and the 2 remaining sheep to Italy. After he had hired domestics and purchased everything necessary for a long voyage, Mynheer van der Denver, captain of a large vessel, came and offered his services. How much will you charge, said he to this man, to carry me straight to Venice, me, my servants, my baggage, and these 2 sheep? The skipper asked 10,000 piastres. Candide did not hesitate. "Oh, ho," said the prudent Van der Dender to himself, "this stranger gives 10,000 piastres. Unhesitatingly, he must be very rich." Returning a little while after, he let him know that upon second consideration he could not undertake the voyage for less than 20,000 piastres. "Very well, you shall have them," said Candide. "Aye," said the skipper to himself, "this man agrees to pay 20,000 piastres with as much ease as 10. He went back to him again, and declared he could not carry him to Venice for less than 30,000 piastres. "Then you shall have them," replied Candide. "Ho, ho," said the Dutch skipper once more to himself, 30,000 piastres are a trifle to this man. Surely these sheep must be laden with an immense treasure. Let us say no more about it. First of all, let him pay down the 30,000 piastres. Then we shall see." Candide sold 2 small diamonds, the least of which was worth more than what the skipper asked for his freight. He paid him in advance. The 2 sheep were put on board. Candide followed in a little boat to join the vessel in the roads. The skipper seized his opportunity, set sail, and put out to sea, the wind favouring him. Candide, dismayed and stupefied, soon lost sight of the vessel. "Alas," said he, "this is a trick worthy of the old world." He put back, overwhelmed with sorrow, for indeed he had lost sufficient to make the fortune of 20 monarchs. He waited upon the Dutch magistrate, and in his distress he knocked over loudly at the door. He entered and told his adventure, raising his voice with unnecessary vehemence. The magistrate began by fining him 10,000 piastres for making a noise. Then he listened patiently, promised to examine into his affair at the skipper's return, and ordered him to pay 10,000 piastres for the expense of the hearing. This drove Candide to despair. He had indeed endured misfortunes 1,000 times worse. The coolness of the magistrate and of the skipper who had robbed him roused his choler and flung him into a deep melancholy. The villainy of mankind presented itself before his imagination in all its deformity, and his mind was filled with gloomy ideas. At length, hearing that a French vessel was ready to set sail for Bordeaux, as he had no sheep laden with diamonds to take along with him, he hired a cabin at the usual price. He made it known in the town that he would pay the passage and board, and give 2,000 piastres to any honest man who would make the voyage with him, upon condition that this man was the most dissatisfied with his state, and the most unfortunate in the whole province. Such a crowd of candidates presented themselves that a fleet of ships could hardly have held them. Candide, being desirous of selecting from among the best, marked out about 1/20 of them, who seemed to be sociable men, and who all pretended to merit his preference. He assembled them at his inn, and gave them a supper on condition that each took on an oath to relate his history faithfully, promising to choose him who appeared to be most justly discontented with his state, and to bestow some presents upon the rest. They sat until 4 o'clock in the morning. Candide, in listening to all their adventures, was reminded of what the old woman had said to him in their voyage to Buenos Aires, and of her wager that there was not a person on board the ship but had met with very great misfortunes. He dreamed of Pangloss at every adventure told to him. This Pangloss, said he, would be puzzled to demonstrate his system. I wish that he were here. Certainly, if all things are good, it is in El Dorado, and not in the rest of the world. At length, he made a choice of a poor man of letters who had worked 10 years for the booksellers of Amsterdam. He judged that there was not in the whole world a trade which could disgust one more. The philosopher was an honest man, but he had been robbed by his wife, beaten by his son, and abandoned by his daughter, who got a Portuguese to run away with her. He had just been deprived of a small employment on which he subsisted, and he was persecuted by the preachers of Surinam, who took him for a Socinian. We must allow that the others were at least as wretched as he, but Candide hoped that the philosopher would entertain him during the voyage. All the other candidates complained that Candide had done them a great injustice, but he appeased them by giving 100 piastres to each. Chapter 22. What happened at sea to Candide and Martin. The old philosopher, whose name was Martin, embarked then with Candide to Bordeaux. They had both seen and suffered a great deal, and if the vessel had sailed from Surinam to Japan, by the Cape of Good Hope, the subject of moral and natural evil would have enabled them to entertain one another during the whole voyage. Candide, however, had one great advantage over Martin, in that he always hoped to see Miss Cunegonde, whereas Martin had nothing at all to hope. Besides, Candide was possessed of money and jewels, and though he had lost 100 large red sheep laden with the greatest treasure upon earth, though the knavery of the Dutch skipper still sat heavy upon his mind, yet when he reflected upon what he had still left, and when he mentioned the name of Cunegonde, especially towards the latter end of a repast, he inclined to Pangloss's doctrine. "But you, Mr. Martin," said he to the philosopher, "what do you think of all this? What are your ideas on moral and natural evil?" "Sir," answered Martin, "our priest accused me of being a Socinian, but the real fact is, I am a Manichaean." "You jest," said Candide. "There are no longer Manichaeans in the world." "I am one," said Martin. "I cannot help it. I know not how to think otherwise." "Surely you must be possessed by the devil," said Candide. "He is so deeply concerned in the affairs of this world," answered Martin, "that he may very well be in me, as well as in everybody else. But I own to you that when I cast an eye on this globe, or rather on this little bowl, I cannot help thinking that God has abandoned it to some malignant being. Except always El Dorado, I scarcely ever knew a city that did not desire the destruction of a neighboring city." nor family that did not wish to exterminate some other family. Everywhere the weak execrate the powerful, before whom they cringe, and the powerful beat them like sheep whose wool and flesh they sell. 1,000,000 regimented assassins, from one extremity of Europe to the other, get their bread by discipline, depredation, and murder, for want of more honest employment, even in those cities which seem to enjoy peace, and where the arts flourish, the inhabitants are devoured by more envy, care, and uneasiness than are experienced by a besieged town. Secret griefs are more cruel than public calamities. In a word, I have seen so much and experienced so much that I am a Manichaean.
There are, however, some good things, said Candide.
That may be, said Martin, but I know them not.
In the middle of this dispute, they heard the report of cannon. It redoubled every instant. Each took out his glass. They saw 2 ships in close fight about 3 miles off. The wind brought both so near to the French vessel that our travellers had the pleasure of seeing the fight at their ease. At length, one let off a broadside so low and so truly aimed that the other sank to the bottom. Candide and Martin could plainly perceive 100 men on the deck of the sinking vessel. They raised their hands to heaven and uttered terrible outcries, and the next moment were swallowed up by the sea.
Well, said Martin, this is how men treat one another.
It is true, said Candide. There is something diabolical in this affair. While speaking, he saw he knew not what, of a shining red swimming close to the vessel. They put out the longboat to see what it could be. It was one of his sheep. Candide was more rejoiced at the recovery of this one sheep than he had been grieved at the loss of the 100 laden with the large diamonds of El Dorado. The French captain soon saw that the captain of the victorious vessel was a Spaniard, and that the other was a Dutch pirate, and the very same one who had robbed Candide. The immense plunder which this villain had amassed was buried with him in the sea, and out of the whole only 1 sheep was saved. You see, said Candide to Martin, that crime is sometimes punished. The rogue of a Dutch skipper has met with the fate he deserved.
Yes, said Martin, but why should the passengers be doomed also to destruction? God has punished the knave, and the devil has drowned the rest.
The French and Spanish ships continued their course, and Candide continued his conversation with Martin. They disputed 15 successive days, and on the last of those 15 days they were as far advanced as on the first. But, however, they chatted, they communicated ideas, they consoled each other. Candide caressed his sheep. Since I have found thee again, said he, I may likewise chance to find my Cunegonde.